actually feeling a lot more confident basically 3 weeks in with you than I ever have in my previous LSAT study experiences. So I've been feeling really confident about logic games, but I haven't really dived back into logical reasoning or reading comp. But reading comp's kind of like the one I avoid, tend to push off. I'm just like, oh, I'll do more logic games instead of this an extra reading comp. But yeah, everything's been going pretty well.
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear it's going well. I'd love to help resolve some of the anxiety around reading comp if you'd like, or if there's anything else you want to cover, we can do that too.
Yes. So basically I wrote down on my iPad right here, I have my overall issues, just like many students, is timing. I'm spending a long time on going into like every answer choice, no matter what section. I'm like, I'm confident in one. And I know like with questions where it's like the must be true questions, where the rest are probably going to be false and there's going to be one that's true. So if one really does fit into the scenario that I'm doing into a game, then I should just pick that one and move on. But I can't. I don't know why. I'm like, let me just double check every single scenario really quickly. So that's my issue with timing, is basically on spending too long on my answer choices. And that's like the overall issue I'm having. And on specific LSAT questions, in terms of logic games, I see that my main issue is with diagramming and like transitional statements. And I've gotten better with kind of like making better inferences and kind of just figuring out what to do before I move on to the answer choices. But sometimes I notice that my diagramming could be stronger. So that's kind of like the more specific issue I'm seeing over and over again with my logic games.
Okay, so let's handle each of those. Regarding the moving on when you find one that works, I want to figure out how much of an issue this actually is in terms of logic games timing. So are you finishing the section, or are you running a little bit over? Where are you at when you finished all 4 games? Or where are you at 35 minutes?
So I'm always finishing up like the third one, right? But it's with the fourth, I'm like halfway through, and I noticed that I'm tending to spend a little too much time on let me see, it's the rule substitution questions. And I sit there and I'm just like, okay, I don't know what it is, but I always choose the wrong answer, or something that it will be like an answer choice that is basically rephrasing a different rule rather than the one that it's asking about. That's what I've noticed. So what those questions in particular and accept questions are the ones that are taking the most time for me. And because of that, I'm like having trouble being able to like complete the fourth game.
Okay, so you're getting kind of bogged down on those.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about those a little bit. Accept questions aren't really any different than anything else. They're just framed differently, right? So you have, in a way, you have 4 right answers and one that doesn't fit. So that's not a conceptual thing. That's just a framing thing.
Yeah.
So you want to be really careful and deliberate about knowing exactly what they're asking you for. So you could even write down on your scratch paper A through E, and then just check off each one that fulfills the requirement of whatever they're asking. And then whatever's left is your answer. The rule sub, though, that's definitely worth spending a bit more time on in terms of drilling those. I actually have a workshop on those specifically that if you email me after this call, I'll send you a direct link to it. And then I taught a whole class once just on these, and I recommend some drills for you in terms of just nailing those down, because they're always going to seem confusing until you focus on them.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know what it is, because I'm like, I find myself with all the answer choices, I'm like, but wait, they all could work. They all allow, G to be in 1, 2, or 3. So that I'm always sitting there like, okay, I guess I'm just going to guess and make it A. So that's what I'm finding myself on those
Yeah. Yeah.
questions.
No, I want you to get to a place, Michelle, where you don't need to guess on them because we can predict they're going to come up on pretty much every LSAT. They've happened on almost every LSAT since exam 57. So we're going back now quite a while. You know, it's consistently over the past 10 plus years they've been appearing. So we know they probably will again. I want you to become super comfortable on these because they're actually not any harder than any other question type. In fact, they're a little bit easier. They just seem like a curveball because they appear to be fundamentally altering the rules of the game. But you want something that is no more limiting than the original rule and no less limiting than the original rule, that has an identical consequence. Now, I go into this super in depth in the class I did, but a quick tip I'll give you now is check your previous scenarios. If an answer choice would render a previously valid scenario invalid, then it is more limiting in some way and could not possibly be correct, and you can eliminate it. Does that click? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that helps a lot because I have a specific game right here. I think it was Prop Test 70, game 4. And pretty much it was a multi-level ordering game. And pretty much they give you 5 variables, and like these lectures must be given in one hall or the other. But they don't tell you, like, does Gladwin Hall, is that going to have the first 3 spaces, or is it going to be the Howard Hall that's going to have more? So with kind of like placing where the first slot is going to go and the second slot, when that's not given, it just threw me off. So when I got to the point of, the accept questions and the rule substitution, I blanked out. I got really nervous.
Yeah, I wanted you to avoid that feeling because it leaves you really shaky when you're leaving out the game anyway. One thing you might try, this is a bit counterintuitive, but right after you set up the game and you do the orientation question, which is a warm-up, you could actually do the rule sub question next as another kind of warm-up because they're both fundamental related, right? They're both just about the initial setup of the game. So it's not actually anything new. It's just what would give us an identical scenario as we had from the very start. So maybe try drilling these in some way. You could take all the games from exam 57 through 67 and just do the initial setup, the orientation question, and then the rule sub question for every single game where those appear. And 10 or 11 exams might seem like a lot, but they only appear in maybe one game or max 2 in a section. So you could do all this in a day potentially if you just focused on it for a couple hours. But I want you to get over this because it's bound to show up again. And I don't want you getting stuck on this when every question's worth the same. But if this takes you longer than average, that's costing the time that it could have taken you to actually finish out the section.
Yeah, I find myself spending about maybe more than 2 minutes on that. And that's when I'm like, oh my gosh, well, and I notice I'm spending a little too long on making my diagrams and my variable chains. And the thing is, like, I'm mastering that when I have more time. But when I'm like spending maybe 1 or 2 minutes on it, it gets a little sloppy. So I don't know if it's like my issue of like how I can get better. Maybe I can kind of like copy and paste these questions or these prompts into like flashcards and learn how to drill them. I just don't know how to get faster at that.
So which game type, I'm not sure exactly how flashcards would help though. I mean, I get that you want to improve on these, but what is the drill that you actually want to do with that?
I think it's just that I think I kind of second guess myself where my gut knows what type of game this needs to be and the rules. And I think I'm kind of lost because I'm like, I don't know why I'm spending so much time on diagramming. So I think by flashcards, maybe that I'm going to be used to seeing the same type of question or the same type of game rephrased with different variables and in different ways. Then I'm like, I don't know. I
I hear you.
actually don't
Okay.
know.
All right.
Yeah,
So
so
is
it's a
there,
situation where I don't know what I don't
right,
know.
right, right. Okay. So is there a certain game type where you feel like you're not totally clear on how to diagram it?
I that specific game, Prep Test 70, game 4, where it's like a multi-level ordering game. I find myself doing better on grouping games than on ordering games, but I just don't know. I think because I also taken Blueprint before, and they call it tiered ordering. So I think when it comes to that, or trying to make scenarios out of it where they don't exactly give you the numbers of the slots, like the order. So if there's like 2 tiers, right? And there's 2 halls, and I just wouldn't know if they don't tell me that Gladwin Hall is going to be the first 3 and Howard is going to be the next 3 or 4, then I just have no idea where to put them. So yeah, I think that type of game where they don't really give you the specific order.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's another exercise for you. I mean, take the initial paragraph and the initial rules, take your best shot at drawing a diagram, then look at the orientation question for how LSAC sets it up, because they're giving you a hint as to how they think about the game. And then if they don't for some reason, or if their way isn't clicking, then look at the explanation inside the course. For the majority of recent games, we have full-length classes covering the entire game. And you could just open up that video, scroll like 5 or 10 minutes into when we've actually set up the game, and then look at how we did it, and then compare it against yours. And do this for a bunch of games of all different types, for every single one where you feel like your setup isn't the right way or the best way. There are, of course, multiple good ways to do it, but some ways will mesh better for you than others.
Yeah, I will definitely take that in and apply it to the next set of ordering and grouping games that I do. And I've taken your previous advice where I saw in one of your Instagram posts, it was about starting off with the like if statement. So like if G was in 5, then where could everything else go? So start with those questions, because those can give you scenarios that will help you with the other questions. That I noticed really saved me on time. And I never thought to do it. I literally would start off with the first question and go to the next. And I'm like, nope, we got to go in order. We got to go from 1 through 5. But then I would spend too long. So it's really saved me on a lot of time on that. But yeah, the same 2 things is that the accept questions and the rule substitution are the only 2 that I miss with every single game.
Awesome. Well,
I'm just like yeah, so those are the ones that I'm definitely going to be focusing on more, but I'm feeling a lot more confident on the, what could absolutely be true, what cannot happen. I've gotten a lot better on those questions just from the games that you have recommended to me, and I've been like following them in order.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that, Michelle. I've got just a few minutes before my next call, but I do want to make sure we touch on reading comp at least a little bit, since we mentioned that earlier. You want to tell me a little bit about what's going on there?
Yes. I'm just, when I took a diagnostic with the Blueprint, it was my favorite section out of all of them, because this is before I had started studying, right? And so I was like, oh, reading comp, easy. So I went by it so quickly. But I guess the initial method that I've been following with my previous LSAT program was that I would kind of have to like mark down and write a kind of like lengthy outline on the side. And I've noticed that I've been spending so much time on my reading comp outlines that I don't really have much time for the multiple choice questions. So ever since, I've been kind of feeling a little low confidence on those because I'm only getting to like maybe one or two passages, if that.
I hear that. And that's a really common issue is the note taking. It just takes so long. And
Yeah.
if you had unlimited time, it would probably be better to have an outline and notes than to not have them. But the whole point is to get to the questions. And you've only got 35 minutes for this section, on average, 8:45 per passage and questions. And so if you spend more than 3 minutes on your initial read and note taking, you're going to have less than a minute per question. Even at 3 minutes, you already have less than a minute per question, but it could still work sometimes, but you got to cut it down. So I recommend typically a very minimal approach. So when I say that, like minimal, as in taking 0 notes or writing down just a sentence or two, how does that strike you?
Well, I think I would feel a little better that way. I think it's just because, before, I think in my mind, like taking a diagnostic and seeing that score, I got like a 143 on my diagnostic. So I kept thinking to myself, if reading comp has the most questions, there's a lot of pressure on me for this section. So that's why I spent so long taking notes. I think I would feel better if I kind of kept it minimal and I maybe write down like keywords or kind of like note author's attitude or kind of like main arguments sentences, then I think I would be okay. I feel like it would help me feel a little bit easier, going into the multiple choice questions if I had more time, for sure.
Cool. Try it out. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out for some reason, I'll have some other ideas you can try out, but start there.
Yes, definitely will.
Awesome, Michelle. Anything else we should cover before we wrap up for today?
Yes, I think I wrote down here. Yes, so basically going back into logic games again, just so I make sure, I had taken notes before, and I think it was about like 2 months ago on diagramming, where it's basically this rule that the sufficient has to match the necessary of another conditional statement. But then I like watched one of your videos where you're saying, oh, well, it's the same necessary as the other one, so then these two can combine. And then I'm like, wait, I was like, so I can combine those if it's the same necessary? I just thought it was this strict rule where it's like it has to be sufficient to necessary. It can't be necessary to necessary. So
yeah, I understand the question. Formal logic and chaining conditional statements is really powerful. It's also a little bit confusing to explain only verbally without using a whiteboard in a classroom setting. So I don't want to risk saying anything that could overly complicate something that doesn't have to be that complicated necessarily. But
yeah,
email me about this again, along with the rule substitution questions, and I will send you some lessons where I go over this in a class context with diagrams. There's a full length class I taught that was like an hour and a half on creating conditional chains. And I cover both. I cover chaining conditional statements where you have the necessary condition of one is the same as the sufficient of another. I also cover situations where the necessaries are the same. And so those will look different, but they still can be done. And it's a lot more concise when you combine them together because you're saving space and all the connections are so much more obvious. So it's a great question. They are different and they can both be done.
Okay, perfect. I'll definitely do that for sure. And I will email you I think I have 2 specific games that could relate to this question. So I'll definitely be attaching those as well. So it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, please do. And then I'll send you some related lessons and we can cover other ones in the future too.
Yes. And one more quick thing. When it comes to kind of approaching now almost my second month of studying and following your study plan, I purchased the 1 month study plan, but I didn't know that I had access to the logical reasoning and the reading comp schedules. So are they all meant to be done within like the same month? Or is it like, because I just followed your suggestion with solely dedicating the first few weeks to logic games. And so that's what I've been doing. So I guess my question is when approaching the second month, do you recommend just kind of like easing in with just doing logic games and then maybe reading comp or logical reasoning? Or do you suggest kind of like dedicating a different day each week different day of the week to each section for the second month?
Yeah, great question. What's your target test date?
So my target test date is August. And
Okay.
yeah, so I've been studying since before I kind of signed up with you, and or I guess I should say reviewing the material, because I've kind of studied for this exam before since February. So yeah, so I'm aware of all like the foundational lessons. I've been through them before. It's just more now a point of just kind of like focusing on my weakness areas and kind of like reviewing them again.
Right. Okay. So it's totally fine to mix them up. My schedules, especially in month one, are assuming
Hmm.
that you're pretty much building the foundations and going over the
Yeah.
fundamentals from the beginning. That's not where you are right now. And so it's fine to mix and match as you'd like. You can do a little bit of each on a single day. You can also mix it up where one day is games and one day is reading comp and so on. It's totally fine. Variety is good because you don't want to get rusty or get bored. But yeah, just
Yeah.
do a variety. It's totally cool.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, because I think I got a little lost because I saw day one to day seven, but then I was seeing all like the list of logic games. So I would be like, okay, let me just do all these games in one day. So that's the approach I've been taking. But it's been helping me a lot in terms of stamina wise, like with these games, because by doing 6 games in a row, now I can handle doing like 4 games. So yeah,
That is
but
exactly
so
the
far so
idea.
good. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome, Michelle. All right. Well, I've got to run, but it was great to meet you. Please do email me. I'll send you some related resources and be in touch. If you need
Yes.
anything at all, I'm happy to help.
All right. Thank you so much. It was lovely meeting you as well, and I'll definitely be emailing you.
Awesome. All right, Michelle, have a good one.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.